The call to action. In the vast reaches of the Andromeda sector, far beyond the safe confines of Earth's borders, humans had carved a place for themselves. The galaxy was a wild, untamed frontier filled with ancient races and uncharted worlds. It was in this expansive, unpredictable space that Commander Alex Reynolds found himself standing on the edge of a precipice. The stars above gleamed coldly in the blackness, as though they were indifferent to the drama unfolding below. The city of Stratus, a sprawling colony on the edge of the Cathar Nebula, was alive with activity. Its streets pulsed with the hum of machinery and the voices of countless alien species mingling in the marketplace. But within this bustling hub of commerce and culture, one thing was certain: trouble was brewing. Commander Reynolds, Earth's top envoy and military tactician, had been summoned by the Intergalactic Council to mediate a potentially catastrophic dispute. The Zolforian Dominion, an aggressive alien empire, had taken Earth's ambassador's daughter, Princess Ilara, hostage. They had no reason to target her, and yet they claimed that she was a symbol of the human species meddling in Zolforian affairs. "Negotiations have failed," said Captain Lyra Quinn, a trusted ally of Reynolds. Her face was grim, and her voice steady as she spoke. "They're not listening, Alex. They want to fight." Reynolds exhaled slowly, his dark eyes scanning the city skyline. He knew it wasn't just about the princess. It was about something much bigger. The Zolforians wanted to make a statement, a reminder that no one, especially humans, could challenge their might. And that couldn't go unanswered. "We give them a chance to release her peacefully, and if they refuse," Reynolds said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable edge, "then we show them why humanity isn't to be underestimated." The commander's reputation as the unyielding was well earned. He had led humanity's first successful strike against the formidable Zorthian fleet years ago, a victory that was still talked about in hushed tones across the galaxy. Since then, he had become a symbol of human resilience, a force that could not be bent, only broken. "We'll need to be smart about this," Reynolds continued, turning to his team. "We won't rush in blindly. We need intel. We need strategy." As the team gathered around him, a holographic map of the Zolforian capital appeared in the air. It was an imposing city, built atop a barren world where survival was for the strongest. The Zolforian Empire was known for their brutality, but also their intricate military strategies. Reynolds wasn't afraid, but he knew this wouldn't be an easy battle. "First things first," he said, pointing to the map. "We need to get close to their command center. We're going in as a rescue team, but we won't just save the princess. We'll send a message." Captain Quinn nodded. "And if they don't release her, we take the fight to them," Reynolds said resolutely. "We've been warned, but they haven't seen anything yet." With his orders given, Reynolds stepped away from the group, feeling the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders. It wasn't just a mission to save one person. It was a mission to prove that humanity, when pushed to its limits, would rise with unmatched strength and determination. The galaxy would remember this. He turned and looked at the sky once more, as if searching for answers among the stars. But the answers weren't up there. They were within him, within every human who had ever faced the impossible and chosen to fight. And as his team set out, the message was clear. Humanity wouldn't back down. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And if the Zolforians wanted war, they would get one. But it wouldn't be a war they could win. It was time for Earth to show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. Into the heart of the beast, the ship's engines hummed steadily as Commander Alex Reynolds paced back and forth in the control room, his eyes flicking from one holographic display to another. Outside the viewport, the stars flickered like diamonds against the inky void, but they were little comfort to him now. The mission had just begun, and Reynolds knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril. He wasn't just fighting for Princess Ilara. He was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. Behind him, Captain Lyra Quinn sat at the helm, her fingers expertly flying over the ship's controls. Her calm demeanor was a stark contrast to Reynolds' intensity, but they worked in perfect harmony. Both had known the cost of war, and they understood the gravity of their mission. This wasn't just about saving the hostage. It was about sending a message to the Zolforian Dominion that humanity wouldn't cower in the face of oppression. Approaching the Zolforian sector, Lara's voice broke the silence, crisp and precise. "We're on schedule." Reynolds nodded, though his mind was already several steps ahead. They had a plan, a carefully crafted strategy to infiltrate the heart of the Zolforian Empire. The mission would require precision, stealth, and an understanding of the Zolforians' own weaknesses. "Prepare the team," Reynolds said. "We'll drop in under the cover of their solar storm. It'll mask our approach, but we won't have much time once we're on the ground." As the crew scrambled to execute the next phase of their plan, Reynolds leaned closer to the tactical map projected in front of him. The Zolforian capital was surrounded by towering fortresses and heavily guarded checkpoints, each designed to discourage even the most daring attacks. Yet, Reynolds had a way of thinking that others often found too audacious. He believed that nothing was impossible for humanity when they worked together. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't its technology or its weapons," Reynolds muttered, almost to himself. "It's our ability to adapt, to think on our feet." The storm clouds of the Zolforian sector loomed closer, darkening the space ahead of them. Lightning crackled across the cosmic expanse, a powerful storm swirling around the planet. To most, this would be a sign of danger. But to Reynolds, it was an opportunity. The Zolforian military relied heavily on surveillance, and the storm would disable much of their high-tech monitoring systems. The humans would be invisible, at least for a short while. "Hold on tight," Lara called as the ship lurched, entering the edges of the storm. Reynolds braced himself, his muscles tensing as the ship shook violently. Through the viewport, the stars disappeared, swallowed by the blackness of the storm. The lightning flashed, illuminating the vastness of space in brief, blinding bursts. Minutes later, the ship broke through the storm's edge, emerging into the shadow of the Zolforian capital. The city sprawled beneath them, its jagged skyscrapers piercing the sky, their surfaces gleaming with foreign metals and holographic runes. But beneath the shine, there was an unmistakable darkness. The Zolforian Empire was ruthless, its heart cold and merciless. "Touchdown in 30 seconds, Lara announced. Reynolds' hand clenched around the cold metal of his chair. He knew the next moments would define everything. The fate of Princess Ilara, the future of humanity's interactions with the Zolforians, and perhaps the very survival of his team all rested on what happened next. The ship's landing gear thudded softly as it settled onto the cold surface of the Zolforian planet, hidden in a narrow alleyway in the city's underbelly. The team was ready. Reynolds turned to his crew, his expression hardening. "Stay sharp," he ordered. "We're moving fast. Get in, get her, and get out. No heroics. The Zolforians won't be caught off guard for long." The door to the ship opened with a hiss, revealing the stark, sterile landscape of the Zolforian city. Unlike the neon-lit streets of human colonies, this was a place of cold architecture and sharp lines. Everything here was designed to intimidate, from the looming spires above them to the silent, patrolling guards on the streets. "Everyone, suit up," Reynolds said as he stepped onto the planet's surface. "Lara, stay on comms. If anything goes wrong, we need to be ready to move fast." The team quickly donned their combat suits, lightweight but reinforced, designed to blend in with the environment, while still offering protection. The dark armor shifted seamlessly, reflecting the shadows of the city. Reynolds adjusted his gear, ensuring his pulse rifle was securely in place. He wasn't expecting a firefight, but he was prepared for it. They moved through the city, staying to the shadows as much as possible. The air was thick with tension, every step taken in the knowledge that their every movement could be the difference between life and death. Reynolds' mind worked in overdrive, calculating the positions of the guards, analyzing the layout of the buildings and anticipating the Zolforians' responses. "This way," he said, leading the group through a narrow alley that led toward the heart of the city. Their destination, a heavily fortified palace where Princess Ilara was being held. It was a place of unimaginable power, a place where Zolforian aristocracy lived and made decisions that affected entire civilizations. It would be no easy feat to breach, but Reynolds was determined. They reached the outer walls of the palace without incident, thanks to the storm's cover. The gates, however, were another matter entirely. Large and unyielding, they were designed to withstand even the most powerful of human assaults. But Reynolds had planned for this. He had studied the Zolforian security systems for months, learned their weaknesses, and now it was time to put that knowledge to the test. Initiating breach, Reynolds said, signaling his team. He stepped forward, placing a small device against the gates. A soft click echoed in the stillness, followed by a series of rapid beats. Within seconds, the gates began to retract, opening silently before them. Reynolds exhaled. "We're in." But as the doors creaked open, the commander's mind shifted from strategy to survival. They were about to enter the very heart of the Zolforian Empire, where they would face an enemy that had no intention of giving up without a fight. The real test was about to begin. The price of silence. The palace loomed before them, a towering fortress of jagged stone and alien technology, its massive spires stretching into the heavens. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant hum of unseen machinery. Inside, the Zolforian capital was a cold, impersonal place. Everything was designed to intimidate and assert dominance. Commander Alex Reynolds didn't flinch as he scanned the entrance. His heart raced, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. This was the moment of truth, the infiltration. If they failed here, if even one detail went wrong, the consequences would be catastrophic, not only for the team but for humanity's future in the galaxy. "We have 2 minutes before the next patrol," Reynolds whispered, his voice calm despite the pounding in his chest. He motioned for his team to move swiftly, making their way through the shadows, undetected by the guards who patrolled the perimeter of the palace. "Stay low, stay quiet," he continued, though his mind was already calculating their next move. The Zolforian elite were not known for their mercy, and Reynolds had no illusions about the stakes. The moment they entered the palace, every step would be watched, every corner would be covered by their advanced surveillance systems. It was a race against time. They moved quickly, sliding through tight corridors and side passages, guided by the faint map projected in Reynolds' visor. The layout of the palace was a labyrinth of hallways, rooms, and hidden chambers. It was a complex structure designed to confuse and ensnare any intruders, but the human mind was uniquely equipped to deal with such complexity. In the eerie quiet, Reynolds could hear his own breathing, each exhale steady and controlled. As they approached the central chamber, where Princess Ilara was held, his senses heightened. He could feel the presence of the Zolforian guards, even though they were out of sight. "On my signal, we move," Reynolds whispered. "Lara, you take the left flank. Zane, with me." Lara Quinn, the sharp-eyed tactician, nodded without a word, while Zane Voss, the team's weapons specialist, crouched beside him, his fingers twitching with anticipation. "Ready when you are," Zane murmured. The door to the inner chamber loomed ahead, its surface shimmering with a strange, liquid-like sheen, one of the Zolforians' signature technologies. It was an advanced security measure, one that required a precise key code to unlock. But they didn't have time for that. "Prepare for manual override," Reynolds said, his voice steady. His hand moved to his belt, where a small handheld device rested. With a few swift motions, he attached the device to the door's panel and activated it. The device emitted a low hum, a pulse of energy that interacted with the alien tech, bypassing the Zolforian security protocols. The door clicked open, the shimmering barrier disappearing like smoke. "Go," Reynolds ordered, and the team surged forward. They entered the inner chamber, a vast hall of gleaming obsidian walls, lit by the soft glow of alien crystals embedded in the stone. The air was colder here, the silence more suffocating. In the center of the room stood a raised platform, where Princess Ilara was held captive. Her body was shackled, but her posture remained regal, defiant even in the face of her captivity. For a moment, Reynolds froze, his eyes locking with the princess. He had seen her in holograms before, in diplomatic meetings, but seeing her here, in the heart of enemy territory, reminded him of why they were fighting. She was the key to peace between humanity and the Zalthorians, yet here she was, caught in the crossfire of an intergalactic power struggle. "We'll get you out of here," Reynolds said firmly as he approached, the weight of his promise settling in his chest. Princess Ilara looked at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Her emerald eyes were sharp, but her body showed signs of fatigue, bruised from the harsh treatment. "You're human," she whispered, almost as if the idea of a human saving her seemed too impossible to believe. "That's right," Reynolds said with a nod. "And we don't leave our own behind." But before he could move closer, a voice echoed through the chamber, low and menacing. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" A figure stepped forward from the shadows, tall and imposing, his golden armor gleaming in the dim light. The Zalthorian general, Lord Vrax, had been waiting for them. His sharp, alien features were twisted into a smirk, and his piercing blue eyes glowed with malice. "You've made a grave mistake, Commander," Lord Vrax continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "This is not your fight. The princess was never yours to rescue." Reynolds' grip on his pulse rifle tightened, but he didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. They had been expecting a trap, but this was different. This was more than just a military skirmish. It was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy. "You're wrong, Vrax," Reynolds said coldly. "This isn't about a fight. It's about sending a message. Humanity won't be threatened by the likes of you." Lord Vrax laughed, a harsh, grating sound that filled the chamber. "You think I'm threatened by you, human? I've crushed fleets with the flick of my wrist. What makes you think you stand a chance?" Reynolds stepped forward, his voice steady. "Because we have something you'll never understand. Resolve." With a single motion, Reynolds activated his comms, signaling for his team to move into position. In an instant, Zane and Lara took their places, flanking the Zalthorian general. They were ready, and their target was clear. Lord Vrax's smirk faltered, replaced by the realization that he had underestimated humanity yet again. But it was too late. Reynolds had already made his move. In an explosion of movement, the commander fired his pulse rifle, striking the control panel that held Princess Ilara's restraints. The shackles sparked and fell away, and the princess, free at last, stood tall beside him. "Let's go," Reynolds said, his voice unwavering. "We have no time to waste." The moment of freedom was short-lived, as the alarms blared across the palace. Reinforcements would be on their way. But the mission wasn't over yet. Reynolds knew the hardest part was still ahead, escaping the Zalthorian stronghold with the princess in tow. As the team moved quickly through the chamber, the sense of urgency became palpable. The Zalthorian general was right. This would be no easy escape. But with humanity's ingenuity and determination, they would make it out. And they would make sure that the Zalthorians learned the true cost of underestimating humanity. The escape plan. The chamber shook with the deep, resonant hum of alarms blaring to life, echoing through the cold corridors of the Zalthorian palace. The metallic walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of impending chaos. For a split second, time slowed, as if the entire world held its breath in the wake of the confrontation with Lord Vrax. But Commander Alex Reynolds had no time to hesitate. "Move, now," Reynolds barked, his voice sharp and authoritative, cutting through the rising din of the sirens. He motioned for Princess Ilara to follow closely as his team sprang into action, swiftly falling into formation. The mission was far from over. They had freed the princess, But now they had to survive the Zolforian onslaught that would undoubtedly follow. The palace had already started to respond to the breach in its defenses, and Reynolds knew that within minutes, the Zolforian guards would swarm their location like a storm of furious wasps. "We've got 30 minutes, maybe less, before the entire palace is on lockdown," Lara Quinn said, scanning her tactical display with a focused intensity that never wavered. She was sharp, her mind a whirlwind of calculations as she worked to find an escape route. "Right," Reynolds muttered, scanning the room. "Zane, how's the path ahead?" Zane Voss, the weapons specialist, crouched near the entrance to the hall. "We're gonna need to get creative. The closest exit is about 3 floors down, but it's heavily guarded. No surprise there. Then we'll make our own way out," Reynolds said, eyes glinting with resolve. "Prepare for a detour." Lara raised an eyebrow. "A detour? Do you have something in mind?" Reynolds didn't hesitate. "The Zolforians think they control everything here, but they've forgotten one thing. Humans are adaptable. We're going to use the palace's own systems against them." The team exchanged glances. They were used to Reynolds' unorthodox strategies, his ability to take any situation and turn it to humanity's advantage. But this was a different kind of challenge. They were inside the heart of an alien fortress, and the odds were stacked against them. As Reynolds moved forward, he gestured for the team to follow. They threaded through the palace's corridors, dodging patrols and security drones with calculated precision. Their boots echoed off the polished floors as they moved, a testament to their determination. The Zolforians had the numbers, but the humans had something else: ingenuity. They reached a series of access tunnels beneath the palace, hidden from the untrained eye. The plan was simple. They would infiltrate the palace's security grid and initiate a temporary power shutdown. That would give them the window they needed to escape undetected. But the plan came with risks. If they didn't disable the security system in time, they would be trapped inside the palace, and no rescue would be coming. "You sure this is gonna work?" Zane asked as they crouched near a control panel embedded in the wall of the tunnel. His voice was calm, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The Zolforians were notorious for their advanced tech, and even the smallest misstep could trigger a cascade of alarms. Reynolds flashed a quick smile. "I've never been wrong before." Lara rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. She pulled up the holomap of the palace's security grid, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls. "Okay, I've got access to their power systems. We can trigger a temporary blackout in this sector, but it won't last long. We'll have to move quickly once we do this." "Do it," Reynolds ordered, his voice low and commanding. Lara's fingers flew over the holographic keys, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The humming of the palace's security systems slowed, and then, a sharp silence. The lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. For a brief moment, nothing moved. The only sound was the shallow breathing of the team and the distant rumble of the palace's internal mechanisms grinding to a halt. In the distance, Reynolds could hear the clatter of Zolforian guards rushing toward the nearest security checkpoint, likely unaware of the sudden failure in their systems. "Okay, now's our chance," Reynolds whispered, his voice steady. "Move." They moved like shadows through the darkened halls, guided only by the faint glow of their tactical displays. Reynolds had been in tight situations before, but this felt different. It wasn't just about escaping. It was about surviving and sending a message. Humanity had fought to reach the stars, and it wasn't about to let the Zolforians or any other empire dictate its fate. As they navigated the winding passageways, Reynolds kept his focus on the mission. Every turn was calculated, every step precise. They weren't just fleeing. They were outsmarting an empire that thought itself invincible. The palace, despite its size and grandeur, was no match for the human mind. A few minutes into their escape, the power flickered back on. The lights above buzzed to life, and the hum of the palace's security systems returned. But by then, The team was already deep within the palace's lower levels, moving faster than the Zolforians could react. "We're almost there," Lara said, her voice tense but hopeful. Reynolds nodded, the weight of the mission lifting slightly from his shoulders. They had outsmarted the Zolforians at their own game, but they still weren't home free. The exit was just ahead, but the real battle would come once they reached it. The Zolforians would have undoubtedly figured out what was happening, and the team needed to be ready for anything. The palace's outer defenses were within sight. They could hear the distant hum of Zolforian ships patrolling above, their sleek forms darting through the sky like predators on the hunt. Reynolds knew that, no matter how carefully they moved, the Zolforians would come for them with everything they had. But it didn't matter. "Once we hit the open ground, we'll have no cover," Zane said, eyes narrowing as he scanned the area ahead. "We'll need to move fast." Reynolds turned to face the team, his eyes hard with determination. "That's the plan. We move fast, we keep our heads down, and we fight if we have to. There's no turning back now." As they rounded the final corner and the palace's gates loomed ahead, the team readied themselves for the next phase of the mission. They had come this far, and they wouldn't stop until they had completed their mission. The Zolforians might control the stars, but humanity controlled its destiny, and they would fight to prove it. The final showdown. The cold, sterile air of the Zolforian palace had been replaced by the sharp, burning atmosphere of the planet's surface. As Commander Alex Reynolds and his team sprinted through the open expanse toward their extraction point, the distant thrum of Zolforian ships echoed above them. The skies were alive with alien technology, sleek, terrifying, and deadly. But beneath the surface of their swift pursuit, there was something else, something Reynolds had learned to trust, the unshakable will of humanity to survive against impossible odds. "We're not home free yet," Reynolds muttered, his eyes scanning the skies as he broke into a sprint. "Stay low, keep moving." The air was thick with tension, the ground beneath them crumbling as the team neared the extraction zone, a small, abandoned outpost that was once used for mining operations before the Zolforians claimed the planet. It was the only place within range where their ship, the Aquila, could land without being noticed by the ever-patrolling Zolforian fleet. 5 minutes to the extraction point, Lara Quinn reported, her voice steady, but taut with the same sense of urgency that gripped the rest of the team. She kept her eyes on the readout of her wrist display, checking for any signs of hostile movement. "We need to make it there without being spotted." "Nothing is ever that simple," Zane Voss said, his voice low, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon as he kept his senses sharp. "We're running out of time." Indeed, Reynolds could feel the pressure mounting. Every step they took toward freedom seemed to tighten the invisible noose around their necks. Their cover was slipping. The Zolforians had already detected their exit from the palace. Alarms were blaring across the capital, and Zolforian ships were beginning to lock onto their position. The princess's presence was the key to their survival, but it was also their greatest danger. "There's a squad closing in," Lara said, eyes flicking to the holographic display embedded in her suit. "They'll be on us in less than 2 minutes. We need to think fast." Reynolds' mind raced. He had never been a fan of relying solely on brute force. Humanity's greatest weapon had always been its adaptability, the ability to improvise in the most dangerous of situations. And now, it was time to put that to the test. "Zane, Lara, create a diversion," Reynolds ordered, his voice unwavering. "I'll draw their attention. You two get Lara to the extraction point." Now, there was no hesitation from his team. They knew the stakes, and they knew the risks. Lara nodded quickly, her sharp eyes scanning the terrain around them, already plotting their course. Zane, as always, was calm under pressure. They were ready to execute the plan. With a swift motion, Reynolds dropped to one knee and unholstered his plasma rifle. He activated the targeting system on his visor, locking onto the approaching Zolforian squad. The figures were still distant, but they wouldn't be for long. He had to act fast, or the whole team would be pinned down. "Now," Reynolds said under his breath, his finger brushing the trigger. In an instant, a burst of plasma fired from his rifle, striking the ground ahead of the Zolforian squad. The blast was enough to draw their attention, sending them scrambling for cover. His heart raced with a familiar adrenaline rush, but his focus never wavered. The team needed him to buy them time. "Lara, Zane, go!" Reynolds shouted, and without another word, the pair darted forward, their figures melting into the landscape. The Zolforian squad's attention was fully on Reynolds now, their weapons trained on him as they closed the distance. The chaos erupted as the squad responded with lethal precision. Reynolds fired back, each shot from his plasma rifle landing with pinpoint accuracy, disorienting the advancing Zolforians. He didn't have the time to finish them off. His only goal was to create enough confusion to allow the team to reach the extraction point. Behind him, Zane and Lara were already ahead, with Princess Ilara following closely behind. The princess, her expression steely and determined, wasn't simply a hostage anymore. She was part of this fight, a symbol of humanity's strength and resolve. Together, they moved in a coordinated effort, every step a testament to the trust they had in one another. Reynolds' pulse quickened as the Zolforian squad advanced, but just as quickly, his comms buzzed with an urgent message from Lara. "We're at the extraction point," Lara said, her voice urgent. "We've made it, but we need cover." Reynolds gritted his teeth and took another shot, knocking one of the Zolforian soldiers off balance. "Hold tight. I'm almost there," he replied, his voice steady despite the rising intensity. The sound of distant engines roared through the atmosphere, and Reynolds knew that the Zolforians weren't going to let them escape without a fight. They had underestimated humanity once before, but this time, they wouldn't be given another chance. Reynolds began to retreat, firing as he went, using the terrain for cover. His focus never wavered from the extraction point ahead. The Aquila was waiting, but getting there would be anything but simple. He could feel the Zolforian forces closing in, but he wasn't about to let them win. A sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath him, sending a shockwave through the air. Reynolds ducked behind a rocky outcrop, instinctively raising his arm to shield his face from the dust and debris. When the smoke cleared, he could see the unmistakable outline of their ship, the Aquila, descending toward them in a flurry of thrusters. "Ready for pickup," Zane yelled, his voice crackling over the comms. Reynolds didn't need to be told twice. He dashed toward the extraction zone, his rifle still raised and firing as he sprinted forward. His mind was consumed with one thought: getting them all to safety. But just as he was about to reach the ship, a blast from a Zolforian turret struck the ground near him, sending him sprawling to the dirt. His breath was knocked out of him, but he quickly recovered, pushing through the pain. There was no room for error now. He reached the ship, where Lara and Zane were already helping Ilara aboard. With one last look at the pursuing forces, Reynolds dove into the hatch, slamming it shut behind him. "Go!" he shouted at the pilot, his voice hoarse from the run. The Aquila roared to life, its engines kicking into overdrive as it rocketed into the sky, leaving the burning ruins of the Zolforian palace behind. Reynolds slumped into his seat, his pulse still racing. They had made it. But as the ship hurtled through the atmosphere, Reynolds knew this was only the beginning. The Zolforian Empire would not forget this night, and neither would humanity. The price of victory. The Aquila ascended into the stormy sky, its engines roaring as it sliced through the thick atmosphere of Zolfor Prime. Below them, the once imposing Zolforian capital began to fade into the distance, its towering spires now little more than fading shadows beneath the clouds. But the weight of their success, of rescuing Princess Ilara from the heart of enemy territory, sat heavily on Commander Alex Reynolds' shoulders. They had escaped the palace, yes, but the real battle had only just begun. Inside the ship, the team was exhausted, their bodies sore from the relentless fight, their minds buzzing from the high-stakes rescue. But despite the tension, There was a moment of relief. Princess Ilara sat quietly at the rear of the ship, her eyes focused on the viewport, watching the fading city below. Her expression was unreadable, but the faint flicker of gratitude in her eyes wasn't lost on Reynolds. "Mission accomplished, Commander," Lara Quinn said, breaking the silence. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a clear understanding that the escape was only the first step. Reynolds didn't immediately respond. He looked out the cockpit's window, his gaze unwavering. "Not yet," he finally said, his voice low and contemplative. "We've done our part, but the Zolforians aren't going to let this go. They'll want revenge, and they'll come for us. They always do." Zane Voss, who had been silently monitoring the comms, spoke up. "We've been through worse, Commander. We're not exactly unknown in these parts." Reynolds glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "True," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "But this time is different. This time, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting to show the galaxy that humanity is more than a footnote in the universe. We've got to make them understand that." The Aquila cruised through the stars, the view now turning into a glittering canvas of black and silver as they pushed farther into space. The silence between them grew as each member of the team processed the gravity of their situation. Princess Ilara stood and approached Reynolds, her steps measured but confident. "You've done more for me than I could have imagined," she said, her voice steady. She was no longer the frightened captive, but a leader in her own right, her eyes sharp with the wisdom of someone who had seen the cruelty of the Zolforian Empire firsthand. "But I fear your actions will have consequences that none of us can predict." Reynolds turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. "We've already made the decision," he said. "The consequences are already upon us." The princess nodded, her lips pressing together in a determined line. "The Zolforians will retaliate, yes, but your victory here may also embolden others. You've shown that humans have the courage to stand up against the galaxy's most powerful forces, and that will ripple through the universe." Reynolds' gaze softened, if only for a moment. "It's not about courage, it's about survival. We survive, or we're erased." She didn't argue. Instead, she looked back at the stars, the void of space stretching endlessly before them. As they ventured farther from the heart of Zolforian territory, the reality of their situation settled in. The galactic war that had been simmering beneath the surface for decades was now out in the open. The actions of Reynolds and his team would be felt across countless worlds, and their survival depended on more than just their skills and technology. It would come down to their ability to inspire and unite the people of the galaxy. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life, breaking the heavy silence. "Incoming vessel," the pilot said, his voice strained. "It's a Zolforian cruiser. They're locking onto our coordinates." Reynolds' pulse quickened as the urgency of the situation snapped into focus. "Brace for evasive maneuvers," he barked. The crew scrambled into position, their faces set with grim determination. Zane's fingers flew across the ship's controls, activating shields and boosting their speed. Lara's eyes were fixed on the tactical readout, scanning for any sign of a weakness in the Zolforian cruiser's attack patterns. Ilara stood beside Reynolds, her hand gripping the armrest tightly. "Can you outrun them?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of fear that she had been hiding so well. "We'll make them regret coming after us," Reynolds replied, his voice cold and resolute. "But first, we need to stay ahead of them." The Zolforian cruiser moved swiftly toward them, its massive form cutting through the void like a blade. It was a ship built for dominance, and the Zolforians weren't going to let a human ship escape without a fight. "Time to test our limits," Reynolds muttered. "Lara, you have the controls. Zane, get ready for a brawl." The ship bucked as the Zolforian cruiser fired, a barrage of plasma rounds flashing through space. Reynolds could feel the ship shudder under the impact, but the Aquila was built for speed. The pilot's hands were steady on the controls, pulling them into a sharp, evasive roll that sent the plasma rounds streaking harmlessly past. But the Zolforians weren't backing down. They regrouped and closed the gap, firing again. This time, the shields flickered and groaned under the pressure. "Shields are holding," the pilot reported, but it was clear the Aquila couldn't take many more hits. "We're out of options," Zane shouted from the weapons bay. "We need to break their lock, or we're sitting ducks." "All right," Reynolds said, his mind already working. "Lara, take us into the asteroid field near the Deneris belt. We'll lose their lock there." The ship jolted as it veered sharply toward the dense field of asteroids, their jagged, rock-like masses scattered like forgotten relics in the dark. As they entered the belt, Reynolds watched the Zolforian cruiser hesitate, its massive form struggling to navigate the field. It was too big, too slow, and they were just fast enough. The Aquila darted between the asteroids, expertly weaving through the obstacles with a combination of human skill and cutting-edge technology. The Zolforians followed, but with every turn, they lost more ground, their larger cruiser unable to match the agility of the human ship. Seconds felt like hours as they navigated the labyrinth of rocks, and then, as suddenly as it had started, the Zolforian cruiser pulled away, retreating back toward its homeworld. The Aquila was safe for now. Breathing a sigh of relief, Reynolds turned to Lara, his expression softening just slightly. "I told you. We fight, and we win." She nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the stars outside the window. "You've won this battle, Commander. But the war is far from over." Reynolds didn't reply immediately. He knew she was right. The galaxy had been shaken by their actions, and the road ahead would be fraught with even greater challenges. But one thing was certain. Humanity had proven something that the universe would never forget, that they were a force to be reckoned with. And they weren't about to back down.